Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is from the Depths Designer, where I want to have a look at a few items today. Part of it is the look at Aerial AI as part of a lab, but also just showing off some of the aircraft I've designed up as part of my, we'll call it level 2 aircraft. With the new performance, I'm thinking of having a nice aircraft carrier with lots of aircraft, and we're going to see how it performs. So I've got a few range of aircraft I've built up ready for use on an aircraft carrier and also land bases to replace the ones we have now. Now, first of all, these are all basic jet engine vehicles, so they've been using the standard huge and small jets, not the custom jets at this moment. That will be a level 3 or so jets. These are designed to be like equivalent of early jet designs. And then the way I tend to design them is I create the engines first, what I'm going to put in. So this is a basic compact jet with enough power to supply a large jet, and a long range version with turbos to give a little bit more thrust per fuel per thrust, or thrust per fuel. And I have my engines rated as, this is 2800 thrust per fuel point, and this one is 3400 per fuel. So, you know, based upon a particular size of vehicle, this will have a longer range or use less fuel. Then we go on to the slightly more thrust versions, where we have the ultra compact version, which is good thrust, but not very much fuel or thrust per fuel, but it does push out a lot of thrust. And then we go into a long range version, which is obviously a lot more, 5000 thrust per fuel, so obviously can be a lot more range for the same thrust. And finally a middle of the range one, which is a rotary, I call it, which is about 3000, so it's got somewhere in between, but takes up less space than the long range one. So that's what I tend to do, is I tend to start with the engines, put them in place, and then build the rest of it around it. So okay, AIs, we'll use this first vessel here, which is a fairly simple vessel. We'll just launch it off from the platform. So this is my Goblin rocket attack plane. So basically it's got a reasonable sized gun and some fairly simple rockets, and its aim is to dive on a target and fire the rockets and fire the gun. So it's a bit of a rocket dive bomber type of plane, but I'm using rockets instead of bombs. It's got a single engine, but what we're going to look at is the AI. Now this has got a wobbling trajectory in general, mainly because I don't use PIDs on this. Now the best way to look at the AI, there's a couple of ways. If I tend to use C, find the particular vessel and then click on the button. So behaviors, now I've started with a standard aerial bombing, and on this I set the cruise altitude, which in this case is 450 meters, because I want it to come in from fairly good height. But I've created quite a long attack run on this at 1200, so that it's going to be a fairly shallow dive, and I want it to aim a little bit above the target. So this will define how quickly it will dive down. If you set this fly over target quite high, then basically it will almost level bomb, but it will have a very shallow dive. If you set this below, then it will tend to dive towards the water very quickly and coming in at almost a very low level attack. And then the abort attack run is, at what distance from a target shall I basically turn around and start again. What it does is it will then try and climb to its cruise altitude, in this case 450 meters, and then go until it's got to the 1200 meters and do the same again. Other important bits adjustments, minimum altitudes, especially above water. That will set its minimum altitude it will try, and its maximum altitude. I've made mistakes in the past of not setting the maximum altitude and wondering why the plane won't climb. So if the maximum altitude is lower than the cruising altitude, the maximum altitude will override it. So if you want to set a high flying plane, remember to change your maximum altitude. Now, manoeuvring is another important part of the plane, which defines how it turns and rolls, if it's using roll. In this case, I want it to be fairly tightly angled, so this means it will. The first one is the yaw, which is using the rudders on the back to go left and right, and we want it to be reasonably accurate so that it can use its gun and the missiles as it's diving to a target. So we set this to 2 degrees. If I wanted this to more circular an aircraft or a target, I could set this at a very high value, and basically it would only turn a little bit and it will keep on just circling a target. That's one way you can use an aerial AI, but we'll set this back to 2. Now the roll is, once it's over a certain amount, how much will it put towards rolling the target. Now this can be variable, depends on your plane, how much roll control it's got, how quickly it can roll back, and how stable the plane is. This plane's reasonably stable. I've designed it to be relatively stable-ish. Then finally, the angle is, when it is rolling, how far will it roll? If it the angle of roll is relatively important. More stable plane, again, you want can have a more extreme roll. If your plane is unstable or does not roll very quickly, you want to reduce this so that it will come back on target quite sooner, so it won't over roll. Otherwise what you'll find is it will roll past, then roll back, and then roll past, because it can't turn back and level again in time to just use its rudder to yaw. So you need to modify this a little bit. Couple of bits which are handy for the new version of these AIs. One, the distance. In the old AI, it used to circle a point in the sky. Now what it will do is, once it aims at its if it's its last point on a waypoint, etc., it will aim at that point. Once it completes, it will then fly however many meters past before it tries to turn around. So basically it won't go into a perpetual circle. It will sort of do a fly away, turn around, come back, fly away, turn around, and that type of maneuver, which is a lot nicer and allows it to, you know, control a little bit better. Additional on this, I do have a water start which opens up balloons just to get it out of the water. Basically, at what altitude does it set the balloons to start, and at what altitude does it then sever the balloon so it carries on flying. 5 and 35 is what I find. This aircraft has got no PIDs, just to show what it's like without PIDs. So we can see without the PIDs we've got a lot of rock and roll here. In all of the directions, it's just basically flying everywhere to try and keep keep on target and aim for its steering point, which without PIDs it will tend to do. Now also, one thing, without PIDs you tend to have to get you can see the mass, hopefully you can just about see it there, and the drag is in line with the engine, and that is very important to get the plane to even have a chance of being level flight, unless you start using PIDs or changing values. In general, with planes, always get this mass and drag in line with your thrust. If you've got multiple engines, then you can change the balance to change this, but I would always say try and get it in line. Now with this plane, as I say, it's got a diving type of attack, so we just put something in. I'm actually just put in a simple marauder. So once it goes over the target, it's going to climb up to its target cruise height, or close to it. It's going to get close to it, yeah. Now once we get to about our 1200 meters, it should turn around at 1200. So there we get a turnaround, and then we're heading back towards our target in a fairly shallow dive. Our rockets have managed to recover, starting to firing the rockets out, and it's doing a bit of damage. Now this isn't a high damage vessel, so you know, it doesn't take a few of these, but it's only 178 blocks and only 5,000 resources, so the aim is to build quite a few of these, really. And the wobbling trajectory of this can be an advantage because it's going to be a little bit more difficult to target. And yeah, I'd say I might have 4 of these or so coming into a target at any one time to try and attack the enemy. You know, putting all of these rockets and the guns down. So this is the second aircraft that I'm going to be using, and it's the Nomad torpedo bomber, primarily armed with torpedoes, and it's only got torpedoes, which is means against aircraft or anything else it's going to be a bit useless, basically. And it's the difference on this one is I'm going to use PIDs. Now we can see that it's a little smoother, slower. The wobble it's got is a little less than you would normally have, and that's primarily due to the PIDs. And we can tune this a little bit better to even remove this slight pitch oscillation. So if we go here, look up the Gnome. So behaviours on this: cruising altitude is 250, a lot lower. Flyover height is -50, so it'll aim just in the water below. Again, 1200 attack, and it aborts the attack very early so that it can turn around for another run. Okay, adjustments on this: maximum altitude 550, 75 over the water. Manoeuvring, then turning quite tight towards the target, and it mainly uses yaw. You can see I've set my roll angle to 150. That is to make it so that it doesn't return. It mainly uses yaw to turn onto target, roll rather than the roll, and that's because this aircraft hasn't got quite much roll, and also I don't want it to be launching torpedoes when it's rolling. And you can see the most extreme roll angle is only 45 degrees. Okay, it has got a water start the same, but the main bit of difference is the PIDs. So at the moment we have some PIDs set up for yaw to reduce the yaw, and we can see we've still got a bit of a pitch roll. So let's adjust this. So how does the PID system work? Right, first of all, you need a PID block which has been added. So this has got 3 PID blocks on it, and the 3 settings you've got is gain, integral and derivative. Now the gain is basically start it low, 0.1, and just add it up if you need to. This is in some ways the amount of value is added each iteration, and you can see as I increase this, the white line actually increases, and we're actually getting a worse wobble because it's trying to keep in it's increasing too fast. So we set that down to 0.1. Now the integral and derivative. Now integral is past time, the history. So when it goes away from the 0, it will it's trying to go backwards. It's trying to use the gain over 2 seconds to bring it back again. and derivative is future, trying to make the future where it wants to go to be based upon the gain. And it's a combination of these two. So one way to look at it is past and future. So on this one, let's just try increasing the derivative a little bit, and we can see that the pitch has now smoothed out quite a lot. So it's basically worked out where it wants to go with that gain and is smoothly making it go to that particular pitch angle. If we take that down again, where must we see that start to pitch up and down? Yes, because it's over correcting basically, and it's correcting too fast for the future point. Now if we remove the gain, I think that's going to be a bit too much. We're just going to get into an uncontrollable situation there. Let's see if we can do it a different way. So increase the gain. We can see it's still very wobbly, so we'll take that back to where it was, and there we go. So now it's trying to look 1 second into the future and work out where it wants to be, and we can see immediately from going beyond each time it's now smoothly coming back to the center point. So changing these two figures, if you're trying to work it out, generally it's a little bit of a how you want to change it. If you get these too far away from the right place, it starts to go a little squirrely. So basically start with the default values, and I tend to move the derivative up first, and if it's not turning enough, etc., is increase the gain and make my way through the various elements one at a time. Don't change too much too quickly. But with the PID, you can also make it easier to control an aircraft which isn't 100% lined up. So this one, its mass, as an example, one of the reasons it's a little bit hard to control, its mass and drag is a tiny bit high. It's not absolutely in line with the vehicle. You can see the lift, which is dead center. You can see the drag and mass are slightly higher. That's one of the reasons why it's a little bit less controlled. So if we just give it a target quickly, just to show this. So it fires its 2 torpedoes out, and they both have different speeds. So one will hit first with an EMP frag, and then the second is an explosive, which actually just missed the target. These don't have advanced targeting at this moment. We've just made it a very powerful torpedo. The idea was that, you know, like sort of early World War II aircraft, they had to line the ship up with trying to work out where the torpedo strike is and then just let it go through. I just thought that would be a bit of fun, and just to maximize the torpedo power. So only one torpedo. There's a second torpedo. They had both loaded. And hopefully with a stern chase, this time they should hit. Yep, they took out its paddles this time. So anyway, that's the torpedo bomber, and just showing how the PIDs work with smoothing out your turns and all your pitch, etc. So this is one of the fighters, the Harpy area fighter. So it stays within a set area of its fleet waypoint and just defends that area from any attacks that were incoming. So what I've got is some control blocks that only put it into combat mode when there is an aircraft within a fairly short range of the area it's circling. Now what I want to show here is how you can create dogfighting style of aircraft. So if I show you the AI in this particular case, and we've only got 2 PIDs on this, so now the behaviours: cruising altitude 400, attack run 500. Now this is an important one, is 4 seconds before attack run. This will override the 500 meters element to turn back quickly if it hasn't reacquired the target or reached the 500 meters. That means that if another ship is following this, it will try and turn around rather than be chased. Some normal adjustments: manoeuvring. So this one has a very good roll control, so it can roll at 25 degrees and has quite a high extreme roll, so that it can roll and turn on a target. It's still going to have a fairly small angle, so it can bring its guns into play on this particular aircraft. Now PIDs, I've only got a pitch and a yaw, that's why we're seeing some wobble on the roll. So these ones only have relatively, these are fairly standard figures. Derivatives are out a little bit with a fairly high gain to get good pitch, and the yaw is, again, doesn't use much yaw. The yaw gain is fairly low, so it doesn't try to, it sort of slowly yaw into place. Now this is aimed at air-to-air target, so we'll give it a target just to see how that works. It's got a fairly small, only 36mm gun, but some nice air-to-air style rockets here. We're fairly agile. It's got 2 types, an infrared and so that's your Fox 1 infrared, and then it's got a Fox 2 which will be a radar guided missile. So let's give it a target. So I've given this a target of a white flare Spike, which is quite a good enemy aircraft, and we've got on the rear of it, and we're coming in with the guns and the missiles. And we're staying on the rear because we're not catching up with the minimum distance to target, so it's continuing to work on the rear of it. Once we get within a certain range, it will then move away and come back in again. It's aiming a little low on the target, but we're doing a fair bit of damage with those missiles, which is good. Now it does have a tendency on occasion to get a little close to the target, and I'm sure I could work on these AIs a little better. If you want to see some good AI dogfighting, then please have a look at the Jimmers current tournament, which has a lot of air-to-air combat. Hopefully those aircraft will be put up by people on occasion, and there'll be more my level 3 type ships. But you can see this is quite happily turning because of those low turning figures and the low distance. This turns into the target pretty quickly to get the missile hits out, and we'll generally try and stay on the rear of any target it locks onto, for want of a better word. So the last 2 aircraft I have created are designed to be more long-range lander-based craft rather than launched from a carrier. These are we've got a long-range interceptor with the gargoyle, much more powerful gun. It's designed to survive on its own, but it's also much more expensive, 15,000, but it has some much more higher level of power. And this is my Beholder, which is basically, it's a reconnaissance craft. It's got visual sensors, it's made from rubber. It basically will circle an area and just give targeting information to other aircraft. It's also just a reconnaissance aircraft. Sort of, yes, it's SR-71ish, but nowhere near as nice as that. I quite like the Jimmers ones that he has in the tournament on his channel, which I'll give a link to below. But there's just without any mimic blocks, just a simple work on it. So these all use PID blocks totally. So if I just release them, so the beholder here basically will just stay at range. It's got a couple of the long range engines. It's got radar reflective rubber all round. It uses infrared cameras, visual cameras, and down below it's got a passive radar, visual camera. There's no active scanning on this. It's all passive detection systems. It does have some self-defense missiles, but it's generally using decoys. So looking at the detection, you know, the wireless range is 388 meters. It does have wireless, but it tries to reduce it as much as possible. The radar range is 72 meters at the front, 99 at the side, below 196 meters. So it's got a fairly short radar reflection range. Rear is high, as would be expected. And then you have the sonar is not relevant. Infrared, rear as expected, 1300. All the other areas are fairly low. And visibility, there's not a lot you can do with visibility. 1300 or 3005. So it's visually, but for infrared and radar, it's got a fairly low observability, basically, which is what I was intending for it as such. So there we go, and it will go at quite a high speed. Potentially it's got a fairly high, about 70 meters a second, and also the AI on this, we can see it's got a very high cruise altitude and also the flyover height altitude to ensure that it doesn't dive towards any targets. It will keep well above, it will try and go as high as possible, but the adjustments are 700 meters is its maximum. So if this says higher, it will still be retained by the 700, but it won't really, if we think about it, go below 550 meters when going anywhere. It will target, I did debate on this of having it not be quite so accurate. It will fly over targets, but you can see the roll, it won't roll, it will purely use yaw to aim on target. So we've set it a 0 roll target and 180 degrees. So effectively it won't roll. It will just use left and right yawing to aim at a target. As I say, I did debate on this, setting the angle of deviation to a much lower target, but it's okay at this moment. I think going over the target is most probably better because its lowest detection is straight ahead, so I really want it to be aiming directly at a target, and then when it's passed, zoom away as quickly as possible. So this is the Gargoyle Interceptor, which uses double compact plus extra engines. This is designed to go at speed. It's got a large 4-barreled 71mm gun and a couple of medium missiles. It's got some Fox 1s. These are generally the medium missile. Let's just have a look at that. Is basically, that's a Fox 1 medium missile, and then we have yet another Fox 1 and a single pixel infrared, so that's supposed to be a Fox 1. So it's generally using infrared to mainly aim at the targets. If I gave it radar, it would end up mainly attacking the ground targets if there was any in the area. And I want this specifically to target aerial targets. Now this is a bit of a boom and zoomer. It goes at high altitude, 575, flyover height 20 meters. Gets fairly close, 1500, but has quite a large reset range of 1000 meters if it does get in with that range. 750 max, 250 is its minimum altitude, and it gets very accurately turning onto target with quite a high extreme roll. One thing just to look at is once it's got onto a target, it's got a 3-second to starting a new attack run. Now that is so that it will stick on a target until it gets to within that, you know, as quickly as possible it will turn on target. So let's give it some targets and see how we go. So we've given it a Stinger and a Mark III, so we can see that that is turning on to target fairly quickly, getting on the rear of it again. A couple of medium missiles out there, which, yes, those heavy missiles did a good job on the engines, I think, on there. There is a Mark III out as well, just to give it 2 targets. We can see our beholder is fairly much staying out of the way in general, so I'm just sending targeting information to the interceptor. So he's coming back onto target. A couple of medium missiles out at long range, and then the smaller missiles once it's a little closer. Spike is fairly much just standing in the air at this moment. Didn't quite get onto target to use the guns there. So that is a quick overview of the new aircraft for the campaign. I may add a few bombers for land bombers, etc. Maybe some alternatives of this beholder, maybe a bombing version or fighter version, etc. for long range bombing attacks. And also this is hopefully a little bit of a look of the AIs. There's a lot more options you can do, and when I get to another level of aircraft I'll start be looking at some vectored thrust and some other more advanced ways to get some quite good agile combat fighters in various ways. And we may, when I do a level bomber, look at how to do bombing styles with level bombing, or possibly one that keeps range and circles the enemy to a great degree. As I said, if you want to look at how air combat can be done with some people that have created some very good fighters, have a look at the Jimmers. Ace Combat, I think, is the tournament he's running. Some good examples there. They haven't posted any of the aircraft up, but I'm guessing on the forums you can mostly download the blueprint somewhere. Anyway, until next time, leave any comments below about aircraft or anything else that you think would be a good idea for the campaign. My aim is to say these are early jets sort of thing. They're some of them's a bit more advanced than early jets, but I'm looking at like early war, second Korean War, you know, just after that sort of time period we're looking at as far as with these engines, and then when it gets to a Tech 3, another level up, we'll start looking at the more advanced jets. Other than that, leave it in the comments, keep playing the game, and have fun.